Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Dustal with AVPro Global. Thank you so much for taking the time to come hang out with me and check out the webinar. We had a session this morning that went really well, so let's get started. Again, my name is Jason with AVPro Global. Today's webinar is going to be on calibration in 2019 going forward. We've got a couple cool topics to talk about. We're going to dispel a few calibration rumors that maybe we've heard over the years. We're going to talk a little about HDMI 2.1. And really just what we're looking at going forward. I'm happy to be here, and I'm glad you guys could make it. So let's take a look at the PowerPoint. And today, here's a little bit about myself. If you guys haven't met me before, I've been with AVPro now for a few years. Things have been going great. We've been traveling all over the place and teaching classes. We do our AVPro Academy class in Sioux Falls and around the country, and we've been doing heavily involved with the ISF and been doing classes with the ISF for many years. I do this stuff because I absolutely love it. I'm a huge enthusiast, and I love movies. I love music. I love TVs and stereos, and to get to do this as a profession is very fun and quite the honor. I got really into TV calibration back about a little over 10 years ago, 2008. And 2012, I started teaching ISF, mainly to Best Buy folks, and doing some classes with Joel around the country. And in that dozen years or so, I've calibrated quite a few TVs, about 4,000 or so. So, you know, I want to share some of my knowledge and some of my experiences and talk a little bit about what we're going to see going forward. I've got some really cool test equipment to show you that we're going to be launching at CEDIA, a brand new AV generator, and that's going to be audio and video generator. You can load custom test patterns to it, custom videos, and all kinds of cool stuff. That's called the Murideo 7G. We'll take a look at that in the presentation as well. If you're not familiar with Murideo, welcome. If you've used our products in the past and attended our webinars in the past, thanks for coming back. But if not, then welcome. We are part of the AVPro Global family. We've been dealing with HDMI distribution and test equipment for several years now. We were first to market with 18 gigs and first to market with 18 gig generator, first to market with 18 gig matrix switches, extenders, and things like that. What some of you may already be using and may already be familiar with are the Murideo 6A and 6G. It's the Fresco kit. You kind of see it here in the picture in the PowerPoint. This is a fantastic kit if you're going to be troubleshooting systems. If you're an integrator and you're doing long wire runs and doing distributed systems and building racks and things, you know, nothing's worse than trying to track down a problem and troubleshooting, and you're just spending tons and tons of time just trying things to see if they work, and you know, taking out players and putting in players. Maybe that's going to fix it. Turns out that doesn't fix it. So being able to have tools to troubleshoot distributed systems is very helpful. The Fresco kit stands out because not only can we use the 6G generator for troubleshooting and sending out test patterns with 18 gigs and all flavors of HDR, but we can also use the analyzer to do things like EDID reads and mimicking the displays. And if you need to do troubleshooting end-to-end from source to display, it's a fantastic kit to go with. We're also famous for our Fox and Hound troubleshooting kit, which is very similar to the Fresco 6A, 6G. A little smaller, doesn't quite have the full calibration functionality that the 6A and 6G does, but it's still a fantastic kit for anybody who's doing any kind of integration work. So a few things that we're going to cover today. If you guys did not check out, if you weren't around last year for the 2018 calibration webinar, it is up on the AVPro YouTube page. Highly recommend checking that out. There was a lot of new information last year, and that particular webinar covers quite a bit of it. Not a ton has changed last year to this year, but a few things have, and we'll cover those things today. We're really looking forward to HDMI 2.1. We're going to talk about some calibration rumors that have been floating around for a few years. We took a poll on one of our Facebook pages to see what kind of things you guys wanted to talk about, and we've got some good answers for you. I do also want to mention a couple of brand new calibration discs that are out on the market. We've been using HDR 18 gig test pattern generators now for a few years. The problem was always that we didn't really have a test disc for 4K and HDR. You know, you could always look at a Hollywood produced movie or TV show or something like that, but you know, we finally have a nice couple of options, a couple of great options actually, for HDR and Dolby Vision test patterns, so we can test players and we can test infrastructure and test full systems. Like I said before, we will take a quick peek at the all-new Murideo 7G. Tyler Pruitt from Portrait Displays and myself will be at the Murideo booth at CEDIA giving demos on the 7G and just giving overall calibration demos. So if you're going to plan on being at CEDIA, feel free to stop by. We'd love to see you. And then at the end of the webinar, we'll have a couple special guests. I've got Vincent Teoh from hdtvtest.com and Joel Silver from the Imaging Science Foundation. So let's talk a little bit about what's different with calibration these days. Number one, we've never had this many different standards and this many different versions of HDR. So something that we're going to have to learn and be aware of and know, which products support which versions. And the last thing you want is for a client who has been doing their research and they really want Dolby Vision, and we set them up in a system that doesn't support Dolby Vision. And depending on the TV manufacturer that you go with and maybe the Blu-ray player manufacturer, we don't want to run into any of those problems. So knowing all the different versions of HDR and who supports them and what they do and what the differences are, those are going to be important. We've got a new one called from Technicolor, which has 3 different versions itself. So there's a lot of it out there. I don't see this going away anytime soon. We're probably going to be living in a world for many years with many different formats, but you know what? I really don't see a huge problem with that. In fact, I don't mind it at all, because we've been dealing with multiple versions of audio for many years, Dolby audio and DTS audio. So I don't mind having multiple versions of HDR, and they all have their pros and cons. And it's our jobs as calibrators, and if you're an integrator, it's your job as an integrator to know some of those differences. Metadata, it's something that we really haven't had to worry about before, but now we do. Metadata is it's attached to the video signal. It tells the pixels on the TV when to get bright, when to get dark, and what color to be. Without the metadata, we don't have any HDR. So understanding the metadata is going to be very important going forward as well. Also, one of the nicest things about HDR is wide color gamut. Knowing when to use it, knowing what displays can handle it and what displays cannot is going to be super important. I've noticed that there's a lot of colors on TV now that I've never seen before on TV, such as like safety vest yellow and stuff that you see like in construction sites. You see those kind of almost neon colored orange cones. Those are the kinds of colors that we're seeing on TV now. One of the Planet Earth discs has a coral reef episode, and the colors on there are unreal. We've never seen these before on a TV. So understanding how to activate wide color gamut and when to use it and when it's appropriate is going to be an important thing too. Bit depth. For HDR, we want to be 10 bits at least. That's going to eliminate a lot of color banding. It's very obvious when you see color banding in the background of a scene of a movie. Maybe you're looking at a shot of the sky or something. It's a really nasty artifact, and something we've dealt with in 8-bit for many years, but now with 10-bit and potentially even 12-bit in the future, those banding artifacts are going to go away, and the picture is going to look a lot smoother. Chroma subsampling, the chroma subsampling, bit depth, wide color gamut, the things we just talked about. These are all things that affect the bandwidth and the amount of signal that's coming through that HDMI cable. So we have to get ourselves familiar with the differences between 420, 422, 444, and we have to know when to use them and when to not use them. If you're in a bandwidth-starved environment, maybe it's older infrastructure, older HDMI cables, you can't always get away with doing uncompressed color at 444. So understanding those types of things are really good. Something that we see a lot in distributed systems, we have multiple sources with multiple signal preferences. So maybe you do have a distributed system with a cable box that's 1080i, and maybe you have a 720p TV up in the kitchen. Maybe you have a 4K UHD Blu-ray player and the 4K UHD Blu-ray TV rather in the living room. So being able to handle different sources and different kinds of signals and a distributed system was really one of the main reasons why we launched ISF Level 3 last year. Or in 2017 rather. Just getting the picture to the screen was causing headaches everywhere and still does today. EDID management, again, 2-3 years ago was something that we really didn't have to worry about. Understanding EDID and how to read it, how to use the tools so you can read EDID and mimic the display helps you a lot with troubleshooting and helps you with getting HDR and Dolby Vision and things like that to the display. We have to understand system bandwidth limitations rather. We have to know when to use 4K, when not to use it, when the system can handle 18 gigs, when HDMI cables can handle 18 gigs. Some of the test equipment is going to be able to help you understand that. And just distribution failures, all these things that we just talked about on this slide are the main reasons why we do the ISF Level 3 class. it doesn't really help us too much to calibrate the TV if we can't get the proper signal to it. So these were some of the reasons that we sat down and developed the ISF Level 3 class, because some of these things we didn't have to understand in the past, we do now. So it's becoming more and more important. And if you guys are setting up even single room, single zone systems, and you're using extenders and things like that, then maybe you have run into some of these headaches. Real quick, before we go any further, I just want to point out that our marketing director, Tom Devine, he will be watching the chat box today. So if you have any specific questions through the presentation, feel free to type those questions in. Tom will do his best to answer those questions throughout the presentation. I'll check it periodically as well. And we'll leave a little bit of time at the end for some questions. And if there are any questions that we don't get to, don't worry, I'll take a look at those this afternoon, and I'll answer those questions for you guys individually. So one thing that's very interesting and very good for our world is with ISF Level 3, there's what's not different. Well, the physics and how our eyes work and how the TVs work, how the TVs make light, that's all about the same, guys. We're still worried about the four major parameters of picture quality. Number one, always being dynamic range. Simply explained, that's the difference between dark and bright. The bigger difference between dark and bright, the better. There was a reason that people love their plasmas for the black levels. People love the OLEDs for the black levels. Some of the higher end LCDs now have great black levels. So the darker we can make the blacks, the brighter we can make the whites. That's going to make a very good picture to our eyes. One of the great things about HDR is we get way more dynamic range than we did in SDR, and that's really one of the most impactful things that you typically see when you are watching HDR. Number two is color saturation. We're dealing now with more color than we've ever seen before. Again, I mentioned before safety vest yellow. I noticed that on one of the Blue Planet discs. There was a team of researchers out on a boat, and they were testing the water and looking at the coral reefs and stuff. And I remember saying to myself, like, wow, I've never seen that safety vest yellow on TV before. I've seen it driving down the road, and you see a construction worker on the side of the road wearing the yellow vest. And it is a very distinct, very bright neon yellow. And the fact that we can see that on TV now is really, really cool. And the wide color gamut is what's helping that out. Colorimetry, color is a fancy way of saying color accuracy. When I watch hockey, I want the ice to be white and not blue. When I watch my favorite sports teams, I like their jerseys to be the right color. When I watch nature documentaries, I like things in nature to look correct. And that's what colorimetry is all about, is making the color accurate. And then last but not least is resolution. We want to make sure the picture is as clear as possible. One of our jobs as calibrators too is to make sure that the aspect ratio is correct. That's all involved with resolution. I use this example in class all the time. It always gets a nice chuckle, but it's a good example. Every time I go to my mom's house to hang out with her, she always has her TV in a stretch mode, and it makes everybody look short and fat, and we have all kinds of pixelization, all kinds of gross issues there. So not only getting the sharpness set correctly, but getting the geometry set up correctly on the display is super important as well. Those things haven't changed. These are the things that we're going to do when we do the calibration, whether it's HDR or SDR. The CalMan workflows and the CalMan software do a great job of kind of walking you through it and making sure that all of these different points are hit. Okay, so let's talk first about HDMI 2.1. And before we get too far, it does look like we might have a question. Let me just double check over here. Oh, nope. Okay, good. So HDMI 2.1. We've been dealing with HDMI 2.0 now since about 2013. When I started doing this professionally as a late teen in the late 90s, HDMI was not even really talked about quite yet. When we saw HDMI first versions, early 2000s, we were dealing with very low bandwidth, 5 gigs and then 10 gigs. And then when we introduced 3D, we needed more bandwidth. And that's when people started to scratch their heads and say, oh, okay, this bandwidth thing might actually be pretty important. That's really when people started to pay attention to it. Before 3D, everything was 9 or 10 gigs. It was no big deal. HDMI was just plug and play, and for the most part, it just worked, and everybody was happy. But as we have more demand for bandwidth, we have problems with HDMI cables not being able to pass that much bandwidth. We have problems with infrastructure and repeaters such as AVRs not being able to handle those high bandwidth signals. And this is really when people started to pay attention to bandwidth. So 2013 rolls around, and now all of a sudden we've got HDMI 2.0, and we're talking about 18 gigs. We really didn't see it too much until about 2016, I feel like. But it was like putting out a fire every day when this stuff first dropped, because tons and tons of people out there had 1 or 2 year old AVRs and 1 or 2 year old HDMI cables. They've ran extenders all over the house or all over the project, and they were having all kinds of bandwidth failures as soon as this HDR stuff started happening and the 4K stuff started happening. So we really started to pay attention hard to bandwidth right around then. And just when we got good at HDMI 2.0 at 18 gigs, we've pretty much got that under control now. Now we're going to be talking HDMI 2.1. The spec has been out now for 2 years. And going forward, we're going to have an end goal of 48 gigs per second for HDMI 2.1. And that does sound like a lot of bandwidth, but you have to realize that, you know, we already have 8K displays. HDMI 2.1, the spec includes 10K as well. We've got a lot of gamers and sports fans that are really excited for high frame rate. You know, maybe 120 frames per second is something that you've heard of. Things like sports that tend to be really fast motion and kind of jerky, it's going to smooth out quite a bit. And if you're big into gaming, we all know how important frame rate is. So being able to do things at 4K 120 is going to really help the gaming experience. But we have to get the bandwidth under control first. So let's take a look at a couple of numbers. HDMI 2.1 is here. We kind of mentioned that before. We do see it on some current TVs introduced at CES just this year in 2019. We've seen some LGs, a couple Sonys, and maybe a few more out there, but HDMI 2.1 is definitely here. One thing I do want to point out as we talk about some of the features and benefits of HDMI 2.1, there are some things about HDMI 2.1 that we will be able to have added via firmware to HDMI 2.0 devices. For example, lately the buzz around HDMI 2.1 and what people have been taking advantage of so far is eARC, Enhanced Audio Return Channel. I've got a slide for that later. We'll get a little more into it, but there are some features of HDMI 2.1 that can be added via firmware. So it's not a matter of running out and buying a new TV necessarily if you really want eARC. Again, 48 gigs is going to be the end goal, but we will see some stuff at 24 gigs first. I don't anticipate seeing a real full 48 gig signal for really, honestly, guys, a few more years, but we will see some 4K, 60 frames per second, 444 uncompressed color with HDR. We'll see that here pretty soon, and that'll fit now finally in a 24 gig pipeline. So let's take a quick look at some of the features of and some of the numbers of HDMI 2.1. So again, I mentioned before we started off with around a 10 gig HDMI 1.4 signal. We weren't able to do anything like HDR, nothing like we can do now. The chroma subsampling the color was squished pretty hard down to 420. It wasn't until 18 gigs we were able to actually get a lot better picture. That's when we were able to do things like 4K resolution with HDR, with uncompressed color and 10-bit picture. Now here's where we're living right now, and it's doing quite well, but we want to go even further, and that's going to be the next step in 24 gigs per second. We will be able to get there again with HDMI 2.1. We see some of that stuff now. We'll be able to do bit depths up to not only 10 but 12. Of course, HDR is going to be included in that. And with 24 gigs per second, we can get away with doing things like 444 uncompressed color with the resolution we want, with the frame rate we want, without having to make any compromises. And then once we jump up to 48 gigs, that's going to be HDMI 2.1 as well as 24 gigs. So will also be an HDMI 2.1. With 48 gigs, we're going to be able to do some really cool stuff like 10K resolution, 120 frames per second with 4K, and lots of neat stuff. So when we start talking about things like micro LED walls that take up the entire wall, we start talking about virtual reality and augmented reality. 48 gigs sounds like a lot right now, but if you've been to any of these big trade shows and seen some of these monster displays that literally take up the size of a wall, you start to understand why 8K and 10K and why all this bandwidth is needed. But it's not far down the road. I mean, we've seen a few sci-fi films and a few TV shows like Black Mirror comes to mind. I remember a couple episodes in Black Mirror where it's kind of based in the future, and people are looking at their entire wall as a screen, and that's not just sci-fi. That stuff's really going to happen, and we're going to see it here pretty soon. So I kind of mentioned before the bandwidth limitations and some of the headaches that we run into with HDMI 2.0. As much as we love it, we still can't have everything that we want. There's a movie out there right now, the Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk. If you're a calibrator or an integrator, it's the only movie that we see right now that's 60 frames per second, and it does have a pretty cool, unique look to it. So if you don't have that one, if you haven't seen it, I would recommend checking it out. For 60 frames per second, you do have to get it on disc too, by the way. But anyway, with the Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, with that movie, it's 4K 60. If we set the Blu-ray player to 444 output, that puts us already at 17.82 gigs, and we're already pushing it for 18. So if I want to add HDR, if I want to go to 10-bit, that's not going to cut it with 18 gigs. If I want to do 4K 60, 444, 10-bit with HDR, which is really how that movie should be, that puts us at 22.28 gigs, well above the 18 gig threshold, which is why HDMI 2.1 is be so important going forward. So when we look at this chart, this kind of gives us an idea of some of the numbers and some of the things that we're going to see not only today, but tomorrow and well into the future. We're kind of living right here now for most things, excuse me, in this 10 to 14 gig infrastructure. If I want to do like 4K, 24 frames per second with 444 color at 8 bits, that's only 8.9 gigs, which is totally fine for today. But when we start introducing 60 frames per second, we start upping it to 10-bit, we want to add HDR, we want to send the color uncompressed, then we start getting into those problems where we're only dealing with 18 gigs, and we're now pushing it into the 20s and into even into the 30s. When we start talking about high frame rate, 4K 120, if we're going to do that at 444 with 10-bit HDR, that puts us at 40 gigs. So as you see the pictures getting bigger, as you see the frame rates getting higher, as you see the color getting better and less banding and less artifacts, we need the bandwidth for it. Now, looking way off into the future, we start looking at things like 8K 24, which I think is going to be really popular for Hollywood. If we start looking at 8K 24 frames per second, if we do this at 444 uncompressed color, and we do that at 12-bit, we're already over the 48 gigs. So we're going to have to be very careful in the future about how we're setting up sources and setting up devices, just like we are today. The difference is, though, is that going forward, the limitations that we have now and the compromises we have to make now aren't gonna really be there. Now it gets really crazy way into the future, past HDMI 2.1. You guys see some of these numbers and some of these specs are already here. It's going to get really crazy. 10, 15, 20 years from now, we start talking about 10K 120 frames per second. Now we're pushing like 120 gigs. Now this isn't anything that we're going to see anytime soon, but it is something that we will see eventually. The next HDMI spec that we've seen is already 176 gigs. So as we're dealing with 18 today, 24 tomorrow, 48 next month, years from now we'll be dealing with 176. So again, this is way down the line. I just wanted you guys just to see some of the numbers and get an idea of what to expect going forward. So how are we able to get 48 gigs down an HDMI cable? The way the HDMI cable is made, all of the data that the HDMI cable is passing from point A to point B is all down these 3 channels right here. These are called TMDS channels. This is what's carrying all the audio and the video. Now there's been 3 channels forever, but there's actually a 4th channel, and it was always used as a low bandwidth channel for the clock. And the HDMI clock is there to make sure that all of the bits are being processed all in the right timing. That way we get the right picture and the right sound. The HDMI folks at hdmi.org on the forum, they realize, well, if we have this 4th TMDS channel and we're using it as low bandwidth right now, if we go ahead and open that up and run that at its full bandwidth, that's going to give us a 4th TMDS channel, and now we can use HDMI cables without having to reinvent the wheel, and we can get away with the whole entire 48 gigs per second. So that's how we're actually physically able to do it through the cable. We'll talk a little bit about eARC. That seems to be quite a buzz right now. A lot of people are talking about it. We've seen that added to a few products via firmware in the past 6 months or so. We've always had headaches. If you're an integrator, you've probably had plenty of horror stories and headaches with ARC. eARC is going to fix a lot of things for us. I'm excited to see it. One thing about ARC that isn't so great is that it is very compressed. So if I'm watching something on Netflix with a Dolby Atmos soundtrack and I'm using ARC back to my AVR, although it is Atmos, it is going to be super compressed. The ARC channel is only capable of doing about 1 megabit per second or so. The new version of ARC, eARC, is going to be able to support almost 40. So being able to do Atmos uncompressed, being able to do DTS uncompressed, and eventually if you want to get real crazy and do a real big system, eARC can support up to 32 channels. Something else that's really interesting, I know a lot of integrators have run into this in the past, I've seen it myself multiple times, but you get that call from that customer saying, hey, I'm watching the news and the lips don't match up with the voice. The cool thing about eARC, one of the great things is that it will have the lip sync correction all built in. So a lot of those problems with the audio and the video being out of sync will go away with eARC. Something that the gamers are really excited about, I'm really curious to see this myself, variable refresh rate, otherwise known as VRR. You will see some video games, and there are some out there now where the video game itself might be 30 or 60 frames per second, but they have these real cinematic transitions between levels or between scenes or whatnot, and those might be 24 frames per second. So giving the artist a little more control over how the game looks and how how everything looks in between the levels and the scenes and things. That's going to be a game changer for the gaming folks especially. Something else I'm excited to see is the auto low latency mode. This is part of the HDMI 2.1 spec. We've seen game mode now in TVs for many years, and it's great because in game mode, a lot of the extra processing is turned off, the motion settings are turned off, and it lets the game be as reactive as possible. So when that player pushes a button on the remote to shoot or something like that, or to duck maybe, it happens pretty instant. And a lot of TVs, if you're not in the game mode, the latency is a little slow, and the game doesn't run as fast as you would really want it to. So auto low latency mode, what that's all about is, if I pop a game into, say, an Xbox, the TV will know that it's a video game and automatically switch over to the game mode. So it's one less thing for the end user to have to do, which I'm a big fan of. Something else I've noticed too, game mode on some of the newer generation TVs, the game mode has always been great to use for gaming, but it wasn't great for TV and for movies because you couldn't calibrate it. The white balance controls weren't there, or they were grayed out. There was no color management adjustments in the game mode, but nowadays you can do that. So not only are we able to calibrate the game mode so the game looks correct and you can see all the shadows and you can see the bad guys, and the colors all look correct to the creator's intention. It's also going to switch over to that mode automatically. So a couple great things there. Quick media switch, this is going to be really cool. We run into a lot of situations where if you're dealing with multiple sources with, say, an HDMI matrix switch, when you switch between sources, it takes 5 seconds, 10 seconds. We've heard 30 seconds, we've heard 60 seconds. There's a bit of a buffer built in there, and when you switch sources, or if the source that you are watching switches frame rates, maybe you go from a movie to watching sports or something, all that switching is going to happen instant. I know that's going to help a lot of integrators out there, and hopefully get rid of a lot of service calls. We see a lot of calls come into tech support, and customers are not very happy with having to wait 30 seconds for a source to switch, and I understand that. Of course it does happen eventually, but being able to have that switching done instantly is going to be really, really cool. It's going to be a kind of a game changer. Something else that's going to reduce latency for the gamers, something called quick frame transport. That is going to be, again, part of the HDMI 2.1 spec. With quick media switching and auto low latency mode and variable refresh rate, I haven't heard much yet on those being able to be added via firmware like eARC was. I would love to see something like this added via firmware. I have not yet. If anybody has, feel free to jump into the chat box here and let me know if you've seen anything different, but I have not yet. But again, this might be able to be added via firmware, but we'll see. Probably, I would guess next year at CES, when we start to see a lot more HDMI 2.1 stuff. We'll know a little bit more then if this is going to be a hardware upgrade or a firmware upgrade. Okay, a couple of weeks ago, I posted up on the AVPro Facebook page, what are some calibration rumors you'd like to have addressed or like to be dispelled, if you will. I've been doing this now for about a dozen years, and there's a lot of rumors that we still run into and we still hear. So I wanted to just ask you guys and get some of your rumors that you wanted dispelled, and we came up with a couple of good ones. Real quick, I love this quote. Feel free to steal it. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, he was a college professor. He was involved in politics. He was just a businessman, just a really, really smart guy. And one of my favorite quotes from him is, everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not his own facts. That's something that we really stand behind, especially with ISF and with calibration. It's not about what I think looks better or what you think looks better. It's about what's right. If the content's mastered at this standard, we calibrate to that standard so the picture looks correct. So it's not really opinion based. It's not like what I think it should be or what I believe it should be. Everything that we do is based off science and based off standards. So one of the big ones that I've heard over the years, and luckily it's no longer a thing, Sony TVs. Up until a couple of years ago, they never had color management. And what color management allows you to do is to calibrate, let's say that you're going to calibrate the color red. Well, there's a few things about red that need to be addressed. A, how bright it is. It might be too bright, it might be too dark. That can cause artifacts, that can cause splotchy skin tones. Red could be over or under saturated. That can make Ferrari red, for example, look really pale if red's undersaturated. The other thing about red we have to worry about is it the right shade of red? Is it an orangish red or kind of a bluish red, maybe almost a purple color? So a color management system in a TV will let me tune everything I need to tune about red to get red correct. And Sony TVs up until a couple of years ago never offered that. So a lot of people would put off or they wouldn't even bother calibrating a Sony TV. But here's what I'll say. There's still things to calibrate on a TV, even if it doesn't have color management. We still have to worry about the really important things, white level and black level. We have to match those to the room. We have to worry about the grayscale. That way, colors are accurate. We have to worry about resolution and aspect ratios and making sure the sharpness is set correctly. So just because the Sony TVs in the past didn't have color management, they still had lots of other adjustments that you could adjust and adjust really well. Actually, Sony's always been good at that. Now, in the latest generation of TVs that Sony's been producing, they do have color management. And in some cases, if you're calibrating those with CalMan, you can actually access a lookup table inside the TV. So not only can you calibrate the color gamut manually at 6 different points, like we've always been able to on other TVs, but the lookup table function will let you calibrate and really get the TV nice and accurate. So, just because a TV doesn't have, regardless of the brand, just because it doesn't have certain settings, don't put it off. Even if the TV just had a contrast and brightness control, there's still an appropriate place for those. So don't put those off. Motion flow. Motion flow is kind of a preference thing. The purists hate it. They always turn it off, but some people love it, and there's really no right or wrong answer here. If you're being a purist and you're being true to the director's intent, then yeah, we're going to turn the motion flow off. Tom Cruise came out about a year ago with this huge promotion about turning the motion flow off because it made the movies look really weird, and I totally get that. But if you have a customer who likes the motion processing, let them use it. It's okay. The best thing for you to do is show your customer a scene with the motion turned on, show them the same scene with the motion turned off, and just let them decide. Me, myself, I leave it off 99% of the time. That 1% of the time I do have it on is, here's a perfect example. I'm watching like maybe Dave Chappelle stand-up on Netflix. That's all shot at 24 frames per second nowadays, all the Netflix stuff is. So when you're watching a stand-up comedy and the comedian's walking back and forth across the stage at 24 frames per second, those slow camera pans left to right make the picture look kind of jerky or juddery. So for a stand-up comedy on my own TV at home, I might turn the motion flow, in my case it's called True Motion because it's an LG, but I'll turn that on to like its lowest setting, and it actually does smooth it out a little bit. But when I go to watch a Hollywood movie or anything else or a TV show, then I turn it right back off again. But the point of it is don't just turn it off all the time. You never know, your customer may have bought that TV for that feature. Something we're going to talk quite a bit with Joel about a little bit later is that the one rumor is that there's no standards for HDR. There definitely are. There are some different implementations of tone mapping and how different manufacturers do it. But as far as like the specs for HDR and the white points and things like that, we definitely do have those. We definitely do have those at our fingertips. ISF certified TVs mean that it's calibrated from the factory. This is always an interesting one. That doesn't mean that it's calibrated from the factory. What that means is that the TV will have all the controls necessary to get a good calibration out of it. And in some cases, you can lock the settings as well. Most of the time, I'm a fan of locking the settings. We do have a lot of end users and customers out there who have no interest in going into the menu and picking up the remote and like I said, pick up the remote first, picking up the remote, going into the menu and changing modes and turning off motion and things like that. For a lot of customers who are not interested in that at all, it's a safe bet to lock the settings. That way there's no accidental resets or something like that. But I do have some customers of my own who do like to go in and tinker, and they do like to turn the motion settings off and on. They maybe like to change the aspect ratio depending on what they're watching. I mean, there's a few cases where the customer may want to go into the menu and do something. So just leave it to them. If you can lock the TV, there's certain codes and certain ways to do it per manufacturer. We do have all those codes and all that information on file. So if you're not sure how to lock a certain TV that has an ISF mode, feel free to reach out to us, email me directly if you'd like to, and I'm happy to help with that. But just because the TV has an ISF logo on it does not mean it's calibrated from the factory. It just means that it does have the controls necessary. There's no way for LG or Samsung or Sony or whoever to calibrate it from the factory to your room when they don't know what your room is. So they get us in the ballpark. They all come off the factory line with the same kind of generic presets and settings, and then the calibrator's job is to go out and fine tune it for that customer's environment. I do want to touch on the blue filters just a bit. When I started calibrating, we still had some CRT TVs out there, so these color filters were still being used heavily. They worked great for tube TVs and for CRTs, but they don't work so well for OLEDs and LCDs and LED backlit LCDs. So if you still are using one of these color blue filters, you're probably going to end up with incorrect color and tint settings. Now, the good news is that there's still a way to do it correctly. There's not going to be a blue filter that you hold in your hand and hold over your eyes. The filter should be hopefully built into the TV. The screenshot here is from an LG TV in the either the picture options or the advanced settings menu. There's a color filter menu. That's what you see on the screen. If I change that color filter from off to blue, I'll get a blue filter, but it's coming from the television and not from a physical gel filter in my hands. So look for that color filter, and also look for something called blue only mode. And you'll see that in a lot of different TVs these days, and that will let us adjust the color and the tint correctly. So just a quick review on that. When we look at the SMPTE color bars, what we're going to look for here, this blue and white, this white bar with the blue rectangle underneath, or the blue rectangle with the white bar underneath. I can look at either one of these two when I'm adjusting the color saturation control. If we take a look at the magenta and cyan, whether you look here or here, I'm going to look at those two bars when I'm adjusting the tint control. So if we take a look at it, these are the SMPTE bars with the blue filter activated on the TV, and the color and tint are set incorrectly. And I know they're incorrect because there's a difference between the white and the blue on both sides, over here and over here. And if there's a difference between the white and the blue underneath the blue filter, then the color saturation could either be too high or too low. If we look at the cyan and magenta bars, those are also mismatched. That means that the tint is set incorrectly. Again, it could be too high or too low. Now, if things are correct, we will see solid blue. And that's what you'll see in this example here. So this hasn't changed, guys. When we used to look through the blue filters to adjust the CRT, we were looking for the same exact thing. The only difference nowadays, instead of using a physical filter that you hold over your eyes, you're going to want to use a filter that's built into the TV. And most TVs have it these days, but there are some TVs out there that don't. So if you're dealing with a TV that has no color management menu and has no blue only mode or no blue filter built into the TV, then how are you supposed to properly adjust the color and the tint? Well, you have to eyeball it. And luckily, there's a couple of test patterns that will help you do that. Most of you are probably familiar with the Three Girls, if you've seen that in the past. It's on the Monster/ISF DVD that's been floating around now for about a dozen years or more. This test pattern is also on the Murideo 6G generator. It'll also be on the 7G generator. The key to this test pattern or test image is to look at the girl in the middle and adjust the color and the tint until she has a normal skin tone. The girl on the left is really pale on purpose. The girl on the right has a lot of red makeup on purpose. So it kind of shows you too little on the left, too much on the right, and just right in the middle. So again, aim for the middle girl. Make sure that her skin tone looks okay. Adjust your color and tint. And when she looks good, then everything should be pretty close. This is kind of an updated version of that same test pattern. I like to call this the family portrait. This is also on the Murideo 6G and 7G. What I like about this test image is that there's multiple people on the screen, multiple skin tones, and I also have an idea here of the primary and secondary colors. If you notice the color of their clothing, we've got red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, yellow, and there's even a grayscale back here. So a lot of times, if your eye is really, really trained, you can just look at this one test pattern and tell maybe the grayscale's off. You can tell if the color's oversaturated or undersaturated. You can tell if the tint's off or right. I also noticed a few other things too, like down here in his jeans, if the black levels are too low, you can't see any of the wrinkles. And one thing I also noticed too, if you look around everyone's body, if the sharpness is too high on the TV, these guys all look like cardboard cutouts. It's really weird looking. And you'll also see a lot of distortion in the girl's face and in her hair and in this guy's green shirt. So just looking at this one test pattern will tell you quite a few things, but really at the end of the day, this is a great image to test for color and tint. So just like what you do with the middle girl in the previous test image, with the family portrait here, we want to make sure that everybody has a normal, natural looking skin tone when adjusting the color and the tint. Okay, a couple of calibration discs. We haven't had these in the past. This is fairly new. We've always had a generator to calibrate a TV, and we've had test discs in the past to calibrate the rest of the system. But up until a couple of years ago now, we haven't had any in 4K and HDR and UHD. The disc that you see on the left comes from a company called Diversified Video Solutions. This is a great disc. You can also opt to download the files as well, because let's face it, not everybody has a player anymore. But if you do need to test that system, you can always use the digital files. This is version 2 of that disc. It is available online. Again, it's Diversified Video Solutions. The disc on the right is brand new, hot off the press. This is the 3rd edition now of the Spears and Munsell benchmark disc. What I like about this disc is, in both discs, really, they have excellent demo footage. So if you're trying to show off the full potential of a TV or a system, of course, I like to carry around some Hollywood movies and things like that. But these discs also have some excellent pieces of test footage on them. The Spears and Munsell disc has some awesome shots of Seattle at night and some mountains and all kinds of cool stuff. So take a look at these two discs. The disc on the left, the Diversified Video Solutions disc, that's available on the website, diversifiedvideosolutions.com. The Spears and Munsell disc can be found almost anywhere nowadays. Amazon's a good place to check that out. One thing I do want to mention about the Spears and Munsell disc, it also has some SDR Rec 709 test patterns on them as well. So you can kind of use that disc to check Blu-ray players and to check the system, whether it's HDR or SDR. I just picked up the Spears and Munsell disc. I've been playing with it for a couple of weeks now, and I'm really digging it. And again, the disc on the left, if you don't want to get the disc and you just want the files digitally, you can download them digitally. You save a few bucks doing it that way because there's no physical media. But I have both. They both have test patterns on them that I use on a daily basis. Let's see if there's a question. It looks like there might be. Let's see. Looks like Kristen has a question. Will any of the Murideo generators support generation of some of the advanced HDMI features for testing validation? Kristen, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked. We'll talk about here in just a moment the Murideo 7G generator. We can test things like ARC and eARC with that. So yes, you're absolutely right. Let's see if there's anything else here. Charles says, with all the new formats that are being introduced, how do you calibrate a client's TV by hand using the AutoCal system? If he wants ISF day, night, HDR10, HDR10 game mode, Dolby Vision game, how do you keep it affordable if done by hand? I'd prefer to do it by hand, but would that take too much time? Charles, good question. And this is actually something I've been really dealing with in the past couple of years, especially. If somebody rings me up for a calibration, they might need a day mode and a night mode. Of course, we want to calibrate the HDR as best as we can with what we have to work with. Same thing with Dolby Vision. Maybe they also want to calibrate a game mode. Now you're talking, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe potentially calibrations on one TV, and you start adding up the time that takes, and yeah, you could be there for several hours. Other than scheduling the job for a few hours and charging accordingly, one thing that's nice about the AutoCal is when you go to do things like the white balance and the color gamut, those are automated and they take literally just depending on how fast your meter is, of course, but it could be as little as 1 minute or 2 minutes to do a grayscale calibration. So yeah, you're doing 4, 5, 6 calibrations on the TV, but with the AutoCal, it does help quite a bit. Now, if you're not going to use the AutoCal and do it manually, then yeah, you're probably going to be there for like hours and hours and hours. It almost reminds me of like calibration back in the day with CRTs, where I've heard old school calibrators talking a lot about how they used to schedule CRTs for 7 or 8 hours for a whole day job. So that does happen these days. Now, one thing that we're really excited about and really pushing forward, we really want eventually, you know, and this is something that we're looking forward to in the future. I don't see it happening anytime soon, but what I would love to see, and Joel's mentioned this before too, I would love to see a situation where I just calibrate one mode on the TV, that's not the right way to say it. Well, let's say it like this, where a situation where we calibrate the grayscale on the TV one time, and that covers all modes, SDR, HDR, Dolby Vision, et cetera, et cetera. We calibrate the color gamut on the TV one time, and that covers all modes. Again, SDR, HDR, Dolby Vision, things like that. So maybe we'll get there one day. We're pushing for the manufacturers to do it. When we meet with the manufacturers, that's one of the things on our wish list. But yeah, as of right now, man, I mean, I myself, if I'm doing, you know, 3, 4, 5 modes for somebody, I'm booking that job for about 4 hours. So thanks for that question, Charles. Let me see if there's any more real quick. Ted says blue only mode is not always reliable. Using blue only mode on my LG TV grossly yields the wrong colors. Ted, that's an interesting point. I wonder if that's a color decoder that could be better, or maybe a blue only mode that's wrong. Ted, if you want to, feel free to shoot me an email after the webinar. I'm curious on what model number that might be, and maybe that's something that we can you know, reproduce ourselves. And if that's the case, if the blue only mode on that particular TV is no good, you know, not the end of the world. We still have other ways to calibrate the color and the tint. Just right off the top of my head, I would say if you do have a bad blue only mode, or it just doesn't look right to you, then I would go back to maybe just manually calibrating the color and the tint using the skin pattern, the skin tone test images, like the 3 girls or the family portrait. Okay, cool. Thanks for the questions, guys. Okay, moving on. This is the Murideo 7G generator. Let me pop open my webcam here, and I'll give you kind of a live action shot of it. So here's the generator itself. Go ahead and turn it on so you can kind of see it here. Sorry, there's a little bit of a glare coming, but I hope you can see it. Got a nice big high definition 7-inch screen. It is handheld. On the back, you'll see a bunch of connections that we will talk about here in the next couple of slides. This is a great piece of equipment for not only calibrating, but if you're also doing a lot of testing and verification. Maybe you're a TV manufacturer, maybe you're an integrator and you need to test the output of a rack, but the projector or the TV is maybe on the other side of the house. That kind of stuff happens all the time. So one thing I love about this generator is, if you notice right here, I've got an Ethernet port. So if I plug this generator into the network at the home or the job site, I can now go into my laptop and I can log into the Murideo 7G generator, and I can access test patterns. I can run, you know, tests. I can validate things. I can do audio tests. I can do anything I want from my laptop to the generator, even though it's not right there in the same room with me. There is an HDMI input and output, because we're going to be able to test things like eARC with this generator. Something that's really exciting about this one too, you know, in previous generators, when we're going from like RGB to video, to a video signal, you know, there has to be a lot of math involved to convert the RGB signal over to a video signal. One great benefit of the 7G generator is all of the YCBCR signals, all the video signals are bit perfect. So there's no conversion, there's no math to go wrong. It's all going to be bit perfect, bit for bit. That was something that we've been fighting with lately, and that's always just something that's very resource heavy. The processing in the machine has to be very, very powerful, and we went kind of overboard on this one on purpose to do things like that. Something else that you notice is USB 3.0 port. We put over 100 gigs of empty space in this generator. So if you're the type of calibrator who likes to use custom test patterns, or maybe you have some video clips that you like to use for demo material, maybe you want to use some of the diversified video solutions test images. Those are going to be built into the generator, but maybe you want to use some of the videos that are on that disk that come with the download, just as an example. You can certainly do that. There are some test images and test video built into the machine as well, but I like to do custom stuff. I don't know about you guys, but if I do the same demo material over and over and over again, I feel like it gets kind of stale. I get kind of bored with it. So I like to change it up every once in a while. But being able to just add that stuff to the generator over USB 3.0 is going to be really cool. Because it does audio testing as well, you'll notice, of course, there's HDMI, there's also optical, and there's also digital coax. So being able to do things like frequency sweeps and test tones and being able to generate different audio tones to test speakers and to do some audio calibration work. This is really cool. One other thing I want to point out to you over here is these 2 ports for different sensors. Let me fire up my webcam here again, and I'll show you what those are for. So what I can do is I can take this little light sensor, and I can take this little microphone. The light sensor is going to go onto the TV, and the microphone is going to go on or near a speaker that's in the system. And the point of this is really 2 things. I can now test the latency of the TV. I can see how fast the latency is. The other thing I can do too is test for AV sync. So if I'm in a situation where the customer says that the voice doesn't match up with the lips, which is very common still, I can use the 7G generator, find out exactly how long the delay is, and hopefully in my AVR or maybe some other device in the system, I can readjust the delay and make that customer happy and get rid of the syncing problems. So lots of cool stuff. Like I said, Tyler and I are going to be at the Murideo booth at CEDIA demoing this and running some test images and test patterns and running it with CalMan. We'll be doing some demos as well, some hands-on demos with AutoCal and some stuff like that. So if you want to see the 7G generator in action at CEDIA, feel free to stop by and hang out. Okay. We talked a little bit about these things. We'll kind of breeze through this pretty quickly. You can test for ARC and eARC. Make sure that that's compliant. Whatever device that you happen to be dealing with is compliant with those specs. We talked a little bit about the 7.1 audio tone generator. That's full resolution if you need it to be. You guys hopefully got a quick look at the 7-inch high definition display. I do have a couple of screenshots here from the web GUI I'll show you here in the next couple slides, and then we did mention the USB 3.0 port for uploading custom stuff. Here's an example of the web GUI for the 7G generator. It looks a lot like our web GUI for our matrix switch, but really the benefit of this is I don't have to have the generator in the same room with me anymore. So if you know the rack is in a basement somewhere and there's some real long HDMI run, you know, I can still go up to the theater and calibrate the theater from my laptop with the generator in a different spot. So being able to just open up the web GUI and change resolutions and you know, basically do anything I could do on the front panel controls I can do with the web GUI. Here's the video test. Again, there's going to be some built-in, and this isn't quite finished, guys. This is still under construction. These are probably going to be named whatever the clips are eventually in the final version, and then there's going to be some user slots too, if you want to do some custom ones. And then here's just a quick shot at the audio page as well. So you can set your sample rates. You can test whatever speaker you want to. You can generate whatever frequency tone you want to. All kinds of cool stuff. Okay, now let me check the question box really quick, see if there's anything so far before we move on. One question is actually a great question from Charles. Will this be in the same price range of the 6G? It will be a little bit more than the 6G, but don't let that scare you. It's not going to be anything crazy. We're pricing the 7G right off the bat, right about $5,000. We may be having some CEDIA specials, so stay tuned for that, and we may have some specials on launch, so keep your eyes open. But regular retail price on that one should be right around the $5,000 range. So good question, Charles. Thank you. Okay, now let me pull up my webcam, and I'm going to bring on our first guest, and that is Vincent Teoh from hdtvtest.com. Vincent, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Vincent, how's it going? Nice to see you again.
Hi, nice to see you.
Good, good. I know it's getting pretty late in the UK, so I don't want to keep you too long.
Yes. Well, first of all, thanks for the invite
Yeah, of
and for
course.
having me on your webinar. I think obviously it's night here in the UK, so I've had to boost up the ISO on my webcam, so it may
Sure,
be
yeah.
a bit noisy and stuff. But yeah,
That's
hopefully
okay.
everyone can still see me. Hi, everyone.
Good, good. Well, thank you, Vincent. I first came across one of your YouTube videos a few years ago, and don't judge me for this. I apologize in advance. But when I saw one of your first videos, before I watched it, I just looked at it and I said, "Oh, here we go, another YouTube TV reviewer." And we've had beef with some of these guys in the past because of they don't always have all the information. But after I watched the very first video I came across, I completely did a 180. I said, "Oh my gosh, this guy actually really knows what he's talking about." He's obviously very passionate. So I thank you, Vincent, for doing what you do, and it looks like the YouTube channel's done really well for you.
Yes, I'm really flattered to hear that you found my videos useful, and I think the YouTube channel is actually growing pretty much in expectation with what I would actually want out of it, and I hope that I bring value to the whole AV community as well.
Well, I think, I spend some time on the forums and on the home theater subreddit and things like that. And I'll tell you, man, a lot of folks, they reference your videos a lot of times. And, whenever we finish an ISF class with a group of brand new calibrators, I always like to give them a list of different resources and things to check out. And I give them your YouTube page as a resource. I also give them, do you know Darko? You know
Yes,
Darko, yeah? Yeah, I give
Darko, yes.
Darko's webpage or YouTube page is great as well.
Hmm.
But I was curious, Vincent, with you especially,
Hmm.
um, what got you into calibration? I've told my story many times. I was a little kid growing up with my grandpa fixing
Hmm.
TVs. He had a TV repair shop, and that's kind of how I got my toes dipped in, if you will, many years ago. What about you? How'd you get started in this world?
It all started with HTTP test, really. So back in 2007, I launched this website called HTTP test, and at that time in the UK, there wasn't any other publications who were reviewing TVs in a technical manner. And by technical manner, what I mean is that we calibrate the TVs first before passing judgment on the picture quality, because I firmly believe that you can't judge a TV by its out-of-the-box picture preset.
Very
You might
true.
as well just go into into one of the departmental stores, look at the really overbright, oversaturated, really blue picture with all the edge enhancement and noise reduction turned on, with the motion settings turned on to
Right.
max. And it's not easy to actually make a proper judgment of picture quality in that sort of condition, which is why I decided that we need a publication in the UK to address that. So that was HTTP test, and calibration is obviously a big part of it, because how else would you know that the picture settings are correct? How else would you know that the colors are accurate?
Right.
And over the years, I've published pre and post calibration charts, and a few readers started contacting me to try and get me to calibrate their TVs. And on a local basis, with calibration, it's always quite geographical, isn't it? So when it is not too far from me, I would accept their request and visit their houses, calibrate their TVs from them. And man, I'm telling you, I'm sure you know this as well. The feedback I get from them is extremely satisfying, because obviously you improve the picture quality by tenfolds or even more. They actually get to appreciate their TVs, get to enjoy even better picture quality. And the feedback I got prompted me to start marketing my calibration services in a more prominent manner. And here I am now talking to you.
That's great, man. It's awesome. I have to agree with you. When you give that customer a really good demo after the calibration,
Yes.
and I mean, I'm sure we all do it differently, but maybe this is similar. You can tell me. But I'll pull up an image. Yeah, I've got a handful of discs. I've got a big book of discs I carry with me, and I've got
Hmm.
some really good scenes that I know in my head that will show off the
Hmm.
calibration really well. So
Yes.
I'll pull up a scene. I'll press pause. We'll look at some shadow details. We'll look at some skin tones. We'll look at the color of, say, a grass or some bushes or something. We'll say, "Oh,
Yes.
okay, Mr. Customer, notice how you can see all the shadows, the skin tones look normal." And the customer says, yeah, that looks good. And then I'll say, okay, let's look at what you were watching. And then we'll flip the
Hmm.
TV back over to the factory mode,
Hmm.
and the shadows are
Hmm.
gone. The skin tones are all orange and red. The
Hmm.
grass or the trees or whatever are all blown out. And in
Yeah.
getting, when people get that head nod and they're like, oh my gosh, that looks so much better. Like that's, for me, that's like my favorite part of it.
Yes, yes. I think, we are very lucky that in our line of occupation, we have such high, you know, satisfaction rate, in terms of like feedback and positive feedback that I get from my clients, and
Mhm.
generally throughout the field. I think, it's a great field to be in.
Right. And I think I know, when you're doing something right, when you have a customer reach out to you and say, hey, you calibrated my plasma 5 years ago, and we just got the new OLED, and I want you to come back and calibrate this one.
Yes. Yes,
So
yes,
it does generate a lot of repeat business, which is, if you're in this to put food on the table,
yes.
that repeat business is super, super important. And I'll
Hmm.
tell you, man, if somebody buys a nice TV and you spend the time with them and really show them how to make it shine and give them a great demo and they
Yeah,
love it,
yeah.
not only are they going to be repeat clients for you in the future, but
Hmm.
guess what they're going to do? They're going to tell all their friends too. Hey, you just
Yes,
bought this
yes.
new TV. You got to call Vincent. You got to call Jason. He's going to make it look a lot better. I love it.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
really cool. Um, what are some of the things that you yourself are excited to see in the future with video?
I think, the current dominant high-end display technology is obviously OLED. But I'm probably going to be more excited about some other LCD-based technologies such as mini LED and especially this new technology called dual layer LCD. I don't think it is new, but it is new to the market in the sense that I recently reviewed a Sony HX310 reference broadcast monitor, which cost around £35,000. And it uses this dual layer LCD. I think the technically correct term would be light modulating cell layer. So basically, there are two LCD panels stacked together,
Right.
and the base layer will be controlling the light output, while the top layer controls the color. And by doing so, you can actually achieve sort of a pixel level control similar to OLED or even micro LED. And
Hmm.
the picture quality that I saw on the Sony HX310 is extremely impressive, and the blacks are almost as good as OLED. I measured
Cool.
a black level of 0.004 nits, which
Whew.
is almost
Nice.
as good as OLED. But I think there are a couple of roadblocks that may prevent this product from becoming mass market. First of all, obviously, it's two LCDs stacked together, so the thickness will be it will be thicker than your conventional LED LCDs, and also particularly OLED, which it will be up against. And secondly, because two LCD layers will draw even more power, I'm just not sure how it will actually pass all the power regulation laws in the United States and also in Europe as well. But exciting technology, and hopefully it will become more affordable, because I understand that Hisense have launched a sort of affordable version, probably around what, 3-4 thousand US dollars in
Right.
China, and maybe they'll bring it to the States next year.
There was a Hisense at CES that,
Yes,
and I
yes,
don't know if it was a dual layer
yes, yes.
LCD
That
or
is yes, that is
was it?
exactly
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So I think the name that they have come up with is either the U9F. I mean, it comes under the ULED category.
Yeah.
Their
Yeah.
branding is called
Right.
ULED. So it may be the U9F or U9E, but again, when it arrives next year, knowing how TV brands are,
Oh
the
yeah.
model
Oh
number
yeah.
will probably change.
Yeah.
And and yeah,
I know you've had a lot of hands-on experience with the X300.
yes.
Have you had a chance to do a 300 next to a 310?
Yes, I've actually had a look at it. I think this is just on a personal preference basis. I still prefer the X300 because of a couple of reasons. First of all, it just have that sort of lucidity, probably because of a combination of the superior viewing angle and also the true absolute blacks. With dual LCD panels such as the HX310, because you're actually stacking two LCDs together, even though it is an IPS panel, the viewing angle is going to be extremely limited, so
Right.
realistically you're only going to get accurate colors when you stand in front of it, maybe within 15 degrees off center. After that, it starts to develop a yellowish tint, and blacks don't really look, as black. And that's why I still prefer the X300. And I think many people in the industry still actually would like to hang on to their X300. I think the X300 has a couple of weaknesses, mainly like OLED burn-in. I mean,
Sure.
these post-production guys, they use it, to master, say, 4:3 content or, CinemaScope content, and the black bars do, burn in
Sure.
on these RGB OLEDs.
We're talking
But
like hours and hours and hours of
yeah,
use,
yeah,
right?
I was just looking at that
Yeah.
without any variation in content at all. It's unlike,
Right.
I think, maybe at this point I should try and allay the fears of burn-in on consumer OLEDs, because consumers, they're going to be doing different things. They're going to be watching
Sure.
different content, say news, say playing games, watching movies, watching normal broadcast programs. So it is extremely unlikely that you will actually get burned in as long as you vary your content and also make sure that you power down your OLED TV to let the compensation cycles
Right.
run.
I've had several plasmas in my
Hmm.
life, and now I have
Hmm.
2 OLEDs, and I just make it a point if I am gonna. I'm not a big gamer.
No.
I don't have maps on the screen for hours at a time or anything like
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
I do watch a lot of movies, and I've got black bars and stuff, and
Yeah.
yeah, I just take a little bit of a precaution, and I'll run maybe like a you can even go on YouTube and find a full
Yeah.
screen color
Yes. Yes.
changing 10-hour long
Yeah.
video.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I watch 2, 3 movies on a Sunday or something like that, then
Yeah.
I'll run one of those videos for 10 or 15 minutes. I'll set the
Yes.
sleep
Yes.
timer. I've had
Yeah.
zero problems with
Well,
burn-in.
in the old days, it's called a screen wash, isn't it?
Yep.
Basically, you're basically trying to activate the pixel in a non-static manner.
Right.
So I think, I believe that it will work as well. And, if I have, let's say, the resources, I'll probably patent a couple of ideas and try and sell it to all these
Oh,
OLED
there you go. Yeah.
manufacturers.
There you go. There you go. You just finished your shootout, and it looked like it went really
Yes.
well.
I did, yes. I think it is fairly interesting this year because this is the first year that we've conducted a blind shootout in that all the bezels were masked and no one could tell, obviously besides us who set up and organized the
Hmm.
event and calibrated the TVs, including Tyler who couldn't make it today to your webinar today.
Hmm.
So we masked all the bezels, put them on stands, and no one could tell which TV was which. And I think it was a very interesting exercise. Basically, what I was trying to do is to remove brand bias,
Right.
either conscious or subconscious bias. And I think that at the end of the day, it was, the all the major categories were won by the correct television.
That's cool, man. Yeah. And this was your second shootout, right?
No, this is actually the seventh year that we've
Oh,
actually
it's the
done a
seventh.
shootout in the
Oh
in the
man, where
UK.
have I
But I
been?
think probably because it wasn't really publicized as such. I think I only started getting really serious on YouTube probably around 2 or 3 years ago. So
Yeah.
I think previous shootouts were not really covered on YouTube. But yes, this is our seventh shootout and yeah, but it is the first time we've done a blinded shootout, and I believe that the feedback was good enough that we will continue doing blinded shootout in the future.
That's great, man. Well, thank you, Vincent, for your time today and for everything you do, man. You're a valuable resource
No,
to the
I'm
community
really flattered. I'm really flattered. Thanks a lot
and
for inviting me and onto your webinar. And
yeah, of course.
yeah,
If somebody wants to maybe hire you for a calibration in the UK where you live, what's a good way for them to get a hold of you?
I mean, I'm on most of the social media platform. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I think the easiest is probably just to try and send me a direct mail on Instagram because it's easy to remember.
Sure.
So my handle on Instagram would be HDTV test. So just Instagram.com HDTV test. Send me a direct mail, and we can sort something out.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Vincent. Good night to you,
Right. Thanks.
and we'll talk again soon. Okay.
Right. Thanks, Jason.
Cool.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Vincent. See
Bye.
ya. Okay, that's awesome. Vincent is the man. Okay, cool. So let's bring on our. Oh, there's Joel. Actually, Joel, you want to say hi to Vincent real quick? We're all here.
Hi, Joe. Hi, Joe. Hi.
Oh, let me get Joel's mute here. Sorry. And there we
Hello,
go.
how
Hi,
are
Joe.
you?
I'm
Good.
fine,
I
thank
think
you. Nice to see you.
last time I saw you was Master Series launch in New York City. It was great.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm sure we'll meet each other very soon again.
Excellent. Again, congratulations on the shootout. I want to commend you on one other thing on the shootout. You are very clear to make sure people couldn't be judging TVs looking at their webcams with your camera and all the obstacles between precision video going over lines to internet. We had a number of people making comments about what they saw online and they didn't agree with the judges. So I think that you were very clear in making sure that the camera is not going to show you what you would see if you were live there, which is
Yes, yes.
key.
I think it's always, especially when you're trying to capture high dynamic range image on these TVs using, say, standard dynamic range cameras or even smartphone cameras, it always comes out wrong. Like, the wrong display will be showing really blown out highlights, and then people will start saying that display doesn't look right. But it's just a limitation of the camera or the capturing device, not
Well, it's more than just the camera. And if you took an Array 65 on there, a priceless camera, you still have spectral power distribution issues between different light engines.
Yeah.
So all cameras will see them slightly different, just like the meters see them slightly different.
Yes,
So,
yes, yes.
But he was very good in cautioning people that if you're seeing something online that you think is right or wrong, you can't judge it online. You have to come visit. So that's very, very good advice for your
thank you.
people
Thank you, Joe.
online. But good job, it was excellent. And didn't you find the competition very tight this year? TVs have all gotten pretty good.
Yes. I think I think sometimes, between owners of these TVs and fans of certain brands, the competition can get a bit intense. But all I will say is that all these are excellent televisions. You won't go wrong buying any of them. All TVs, they will have their respective strengths and weaknesses, and that's what the shootout is all about.
Yes, my conclusion after watching the crew set up for 2 days was that I'm very happy I wasn't the judge.
Oh, yeah, that would have been tough, yeah. Very tough.
Excellent. So thanks for joining us on this. This is wonderful. Good to see you. Great.
Nice to see you, Joe. Okay, thanks, Jason. All right.
Yeah, bye, Vincent. We'll see you later.
Okay.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Hey,
Nice
Joel.
job, Jason. You covered a lot of ground. It was great.
Yeah, he's one of the guys that if there's a new panel out that I haven't gotten my hands on yet, he's his YouTube channel, he's got new panels like the day they come out sometimes, and very quickly at least. So if it's a new panel I haven't got my own hands on yet, I'll go watch some of his videos. He's excellent.
Well, it's a pleasure to have an industry, not just being a good calibrator, he communicates very well, he does a great job. So
yep, that's good.
We're fortunate to have a number of talented people around the world, helping carry the torch to increase awareness of what good TV should look like and what calibration does, and just how good the market is and how exciting it is now.
Does it kind of blow your mind a little bit to see how far all this has come in the past since 1994?
Well, number one, it's deep shock. I had no idea the company would be taking this tact and this amount of influence in the world. We were originally aiming at the people who did front projection in the CRT world and people who put in Ferrugia products and things like that. We aimed at about 300 dealers. We never dreamed of 7,000.
Yeah.
We never dreamed we'd be working with consumer products. We're dealing with broadcast monitors and ultra high-end home theaters in those days. So the trickle on down has been amazing, but the awareness from the press has been phenomenal. I came from the press, so seeing how the press has evolved from the chaos we had of people's opinions about what a TV should look like versus deploying metrics, meters, software, and doing critical analysis and reporting it accurately, it's been gratifying beyond belief. And it's been a hell of a ride.
I know you especially, you always call yourself a closeted audiophile. It's funny too, because that kind of fits me too. As much as we're into video, I love music. And the thing with audio that's always been kind of funny to me is there is a lot of like subjectiveness to it, where some guy hears it one way, another guy hears it another way. But the cool thing about video is it's like, look, this is the correct grayscale. Look, it's right, it's right here on paper. We measured it. That's correct.
But it comes from the source. I worked with a magazine years ago, an audio magazine, and I would go up to New York to visit the owner, and I would buy tickets at Carnegie. And being a visual person, I would strive to get tickets in the first 10, 12 rows dead center, because I wanted to see, faces, strings, people's fingers on islands. And he would spend the entire concert complaining because he wanted to be back at least a third to hear the ambiance of the hall.
Yeah.
If we couldn't agree on where to sit in Carnegie, we certainly wouldn't agree on the perspective that a loudspeaker put out.
Right. Yeah.
But you go look from the first row to the last row of the movie theater, color's the same.
That's true.
And with screens they use, viewing angles, the color's the same. And the other thing I'd like to touch on, I don't know how many of the people online with us right now have actually been to the next generation laser Dolby Vision theaters. There's only a couple hundred of them around the world out of 135,000, but we've been modeling what we're doing at home on what Dolby's doing in the theater with 3 to 5 times light output, with a much better designed room, with better light control. Even exit signs are better controlled. And they've done a fabulous job of pointing to a possible future for theatrical display that's much more dynamic, and that's the intriguing part about this era. As much as they're doing a phenomenal job with HDR in the movie theaters in a very minuscule number of theaters compared to the globe, HDR and wide color gamut is a home theater event. much more than a theatrical event. So we are now leading the charge and taking content to people in its next generation through televisions. You don't have to go to a movie theater to see the current technology. In fact, you're going to be hard pressed to find current technology in the movie theater. And I could say we do this in sessions, do the same thing. A homework assignment in an ISF seminar is to go find a Dolby Vision theater. Go look at the 4-chip DLP with the 6 lasers and the metadata control that actually turns the lasers off to generate blacks, which is incredible. You can do that, but this is another possible future that could take us to HDR in the theaters globally.
I remember you and I got lucky and we were able to catch Black Panther in Scottsdale. We were out there for a class, and that was my first experience in a Dolby Vision theater. And I mean, you and I were nudging each other like, "Ooh, look at that!" Because I've never.
I thought you were going to hurt the chair. You were gripping the chair pretty hard.
Yeah. Well,
Dream scenes. I've never seen that color. And by the way, you had never seen that color in electronics.
Right.
It was the first time you saw it.
When the image in that particular movie, there's a scene where they're in a nightclub, and there's a character in the movie wearing a very deep saturated red dress, and her dress was still deep saturated red in a nighttime scene, and that's really difficult to do, and I was completely blown away by it. It was very cool.
Well, a lot of it is simply power. So one of the things we're challenged with right now, and I know you had a job on my side of Florida last week where you're looking at a projection system with a much too large a screen on much too small a light engine, and it was dull and it was not dynamic. Dolby's getting 3 to 5 times light output of the average movie theater. That's a good start. Yeah,
that's a good place to start. Yeah.
One of the things we're finding, and I'll be talking about this at CEDIA, if you're a custom integrator and the budget for the chairs is larger than the budget for the projector, you've blown the install. You do not have a dynamic picture. You need light, you need power, and you need to be able to generate something dynamic beyond anything you've ever done before to get HDR to work on a projector. Now, if you do a good job on light control, you've got one of the high-end OLEDs or one of the really nicely designed LED devices where the AI is doing the dimming, you can get some pretty remarkable pictures out of competing technologies in the home. And one of the things that really impressed me, going back to our New York shootouts, similar to what Vincent did, we had 2 TVs side by side. One was a Dolby Vision capable OLED. The other was a HDR10, not a Dolby Vision capable, LED technology TV. So we actually used 2 of the new Panasonic Blu-ray players. One we set up, of course, HDR10. The other was set up for the Dolby track on the disc. So different layers were playing, different technologies were displaying it, different manufacturers are there. In one sense, the AI in the TV was doing what they could do for tone mapping and local area dimming, and the OLED was following the Dolby Vision instructions. So they couldn't be more different from machine or content, and the pictures were remarkably close to each other.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
I mean, we all sat there and our jaws dropped. Now you're calibrating, and you've done this like I've done it so many times. You're looking at the results, you're saying, this is probably going to look good. But when the picture is finally on the screen, and we're looking at Aquaman. I won't testify much to the movie, but we're using Chapter 9. It's a rather striking looking disc. It was gorgeous on both TVs.
Yeah.
Different content, different layers, different technologies, great looking, and they look close to the same TV.
That's cool. Do you have any thoughts on, as we look at new technologies? I know there's Samsung's talking OLED. LG has a new assembly line that they announced about a month ago where they're going to be making big OLEDs. And we've seen micro LED now for the past few major trade shows. Do you have any thoughts on what those big dynamic displays are going to do to projection systems?
Well, actually, I was invited to come to an opening in Korea, my first visit there. I was sitting at the demilitarized zone. And on the top of the plant, they've got, the type of binoculars you see in the Grand Canyon. And we were waving at the people in North Korea across the DMZ because they also built a plant.
Yeah.
There's not much going on there with military action, but there's a lot of manufacturing. The compromised eyesore is a major issue for getting OLED large size screens. And I won't give you the actual size that can be made in this plant. I don't think they released that information, but it is beyond any expectations you've seen for a TV set. The only problem I foresee is it's got to be rollable once because you can't get this in an elevator or through a door.
Yeah.
So it is huge. Now, to answer your question properly, at the Master Series launch for Sony in New York, we had lunch with someone from Sony Pictures. They wanted some feedback on what we thought the upcoming TV sizes would be in the future. And I said, I can't answer that question. You've asked the wrong question. They said, oh, I need to know what we should be thinking of for the long-term future for TV sizes. I said, well, you shouldn't be thinking TV sizes. You should be thinking room sizes.
Room size, yeah.
We're going to fill the wall. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you the technology we can do with, I've got a 17-foot wall right now, and there is a TV set I want to fill that wall. I'm a little light on the finances to buy it because it would cost more than my house.
Yeah.
But we can do it at price on object right now with 1,000 nits, P3 color, and good blacks. And you probably know the wall we're looking at. It's luster.
Oh, yeah.
And we're putting one on a boat as we speak right now. So it's the right technology for a boat at 1,000 nits.
Yeah.
Prices tend to trickle on down.
Sure.
And that's a hand-assembled item. So between different OLEDs, rollable OLEDs, long OLEDs, cubes that come together like Legos.
Yep.
We'll fill the wall one day. So
You know,
the room size, and maybe some of it will be 10K, but we'll watch most of our movies smaller. And I'll have the baby cam on one corner, so my wife won't be bugging me to check the baby. We'll have the doorbell on the other. I'll have stock market alerts in one corner. If the movie's captivating, I'll wave my hand, and the gesture will fill the screen.
Yeah. Yeah. But speaking on price too, I mean, the first plasmas I ever dealt with as a brand new home theater guy, you know, when I was in my late teens, we were dealing with $40,000 plasmas. So, you know, it'll come down. And
$40,000 plasmas. We were sitting once with a gentleman who's legendary in the business, but many of the younger guys won't know him, Mr. Sam Runco.
Mm-hmm.
And we were running a session out here at Runco with the first plasma panels. He had a gent from Boston. He called it a plasmer. So he actually trademarked the term. Well, he's from Boston. He can't speak. So
yeah.
Plasmer. So
yeah.
he actually trademarked that term. And during the training, we took a look at it, and the gray blacks were gray. There were no blacks.
Right.
Red was orange. Green was yellow. And the owner said, I don't think I want to put my name in this product and sell it. And one of the dealers in the room said, you don't get it. I got 6 of them sold.
Yeah.
They're sold with your name on it.
You can hang it on the wall.
We hung it on the wall in Hillsborough, San Francisco, and Monday morning, and the owner Sam is saying, you know, I just don't like that. It's a terrible picture. And 9:01 Monday morning, I'm getting ready to the airport. Phone rings, and he picks up the phone, and it's the woman. He goes, Joe, we never should have sold that thing. Goes, yes, ma'am. Yes, you got the 6 of the new technologies. Yes. You want to thank me? 100 people at the party, life of unbelievable. Well, ma'am, I'm just happy you got them. I'm happy you're happy with it. It's a wonderful technology. So Sam hung up the phone and said, Joel, we don't know anything about this business.
No.
We were looking at the tech. She was looking at flat panels in the room, but there were none. And yeah, it was the expensive 6 panels being sold into a home that was tens of millions. On the other hand, now they're a little less expensive and they're quite a bit better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Just a little bit. Yeah.
A little bit better. So the blacks are now black. In fact, I regret everything I ever wrote or talked about the term good blacks.
Yeah.
We were talking gibberish. There's no such thing as a good black.
It's either,
We talked about, how dark the gray was. Now we've actually got, between the OLEDs, which are naturally black, and the AI-driven local area dimming LEDs, especially those 2 layers, they're really approaching OLED blacks. And for all discernible purposes, unless your room's pitch black, it's black.
Yeah.
So we've got finally good blacks.
Yeah.
So let's say we have blacks. We never had that before.
There's something really cool about when if I start maybe a movie or show on Netflix, the wall behind my TV on both my TVs is in the living room it's dark and the bedroom it's black. And when that Netflix logo pops up and it's just super saturated red and there's nothing else there. Oh, it's so cool.
The side is dark gray and the other one is really dark gray. And when there's dark on there and the room light's under control. But if you think about it, we used to have with the plasma displays, even the illustrious Kuro, which is the dream display.
Sure.
If you were lucky, you had 120 nits.
Yeah, very lucky, yeah.
And the blacks were kind of like good blacks, but they weren't black by any means. So now we're dealing real blacks. And on the weak light output HDR TVs, 700 to 800 nits.
Right.
So blacker blacks, 7 times brighter, and we just had one in the lab here that was over 3,000 nits.
Yeah. Yep. So, and I know we're pushing 4 on a panel or 2 right now too, right?
Not delivered yet, but we're pushing close.
Yeah, it's close. It's close.
What we really need is more reference monitors coming from the studio side. at 4,000 nits, because the Dolby Pulsar is a wonderful machine, but you can't buy tons of those things.
And it's liquid cooled, right?
Thankfully, but it's a noisy little machine. You don't want to spend an 18-hour day working in a room with that.
Yeah, no way. No
They
way.
use the final edit for a reason, but it's noisy to survive. But I saw that back, the Wayback Machine, 2006, 2007.
Right.
It was, it wasn't the pre-production stage. It was the hacksaw and drill press stage.
Yeah.
These were mad scientists, and you saw it, and you really wish you had not. Because once you see real dynamic range with blacks and 4,000 nits, you wish you hadn't seen it.
Everything else is like, eh.
So my comment is, I don't want to see this until I can take it home.
Yeah.
So I don't have the 4,000 nits yet, but we're close.
We're close. Yeah, we're getting there.
But I'm going back to old clients who, again, I've been calibrating for them for years.
Right.
They're just blowing their minds.
Yeah.
I mean, they knew it was going to be better, but we fire things up, and you and I talked about good demo material. That's still the key to our business.
Sure.
Finding really good demo material and good displays to show it on. People are just happy.
Yep.
They're giddy because they spent so little and they got so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've got a lot of whiners out here complaining, HDR is hard and this is hard. I will tell you one thing, it's hard, and we have a solution for it. What's really hard, turning HDR on.
Making it actually show up, yeah.
And you talked about some distribution issues and some HDMI 2.1 issues. We had problems back with HDMI 1.4.
I can only imagine coming from component into HDMI must have been a huge transition.
And when we went to 1080p with the Blu-ray players, we had catastrophic problems because things were fine at 1080i, and we failed at 1080p. And that story is now continuing. So one of the things that's difficult, now with some of the people you work with, we've got some pretty exotic testing for HDMI products.
Sure.
So we found a lot of the 10.2 gig cable was successful at 12, 13, or 14 gig because they had some headroom, as all cables do. If you're designing a 10.2 gig cable, you're not going to fail at 10.3. You're going to put some headroom in there.
Sure.
So when we had Blu-rays, and you showed the charts before, I'm looking at a 24 frame per second HDR device. I may be at somewhere between 9 and 13 gig, and it works. Even though the cable's not an 18 gig cable, I'm only using 12, 13. 13.35 is pretty common in our testing. We've seen a lot of that on the Blu-rays. So the old cable works. Plug in an Apple TV at 4K 60, and it fails.
Right.
And then go back to your cable because you're under borderline, and now you've got macro blocking and noise and intermittent failures. And this is just a warm up for 18 gig.
It's going to happen again. Yep.
18 gig is a warm up for 48, but the world of 48 is going to bring us a whole nother dimension.
Yeah.
You mentioned it, but it's going to bring sports to life.
Yes.
And I've had the equal misfortune of seeing a significant amount of tennis at 120.
Oh yeah.
Next to 60.
How that ball must just be smooth.
Well, it's not that the ball is smooth, it's that the 60 is terrible. You
Right.
don't see one as being better, you just see the disaster that you used to like.
Yeah.
So it's a temporal resolution is how we have to call it. It's equally important to spatial. In fact, I would rather have more temporal than more spatial. Leave the 4K alone, don't take it to 8K, but give me 60 to 120.
Yeah.
So I'll take the spatial in 4K, that's fine. And as you've seen, we've been doing a lot of testing, how close you can get to a big screen. You can get closer than most people are comfortable with at 4K.
Totally, yeah.
If you're gonna have an 8K master and I gotta get into a home, take it down to 4K, keep the 120.
Yeah, yep.
And take the 444, take it down to 420. Because on sports, you're not gonna see the saturation at 444 and the up conversion to 444 on our TVs. I don't know, you've seen it too. It's remarkably good for built-in processing.
Yeah, yep. The Spears disc has a great test pattern on there for the color multiverse pattern. You can take one look at it for a second and tell if it's good or not.
But I don't come from a world where the internal processing in a TV was acceptable.
Right.
I come from a world where you had to spend a fortune to get it to be acceptable, and now it's free. It comes with a TV, and a lot of them are frighteningly good to the point where I worry about the sales possibility of standalone processors.
Well, you guys back in the day had to buy a separate box for 3.2 pull down.
It worked. We had one, only one, and he had a patent on it, and it was $24,000.
Yeah, now it's an auto setting on the TV.
And it's an $18 chipset for the cheap one, and a little over $100 for the great one. So
for the perfect one,
wonderful era. But on the connectivity side, let me talk about current events if I can. I have three I want to touch on.
Sure.
On the connectivity side, then Jason has to get complimented by everyone on this call. The document that's coming is called the CEB23. It's a combination of a committee working with the CTA and CEDIA. And this is a 2.5-year project that's coming to its fruition. This is the first time it's being shown publicly. There'll be a class being taught on this at CEDIA, but the document's not to be released yet. So we're giving a preview of what's going to be available.
Do you see it on your screen?
I see it on mine, but this is
Okay.
how you verify whether the operability of the HDMI is working. In other words, I wrote a story a few years back about what I was seeing with HDR. And it was a play on an old Zero Mostel, ancient Broadway thing. It was, you know, a funny thing happened on the way to the forum. We called it a funny thing happened to my HDR on the way to my TV.
Yeah.
Like, it got destroyed before it made it to the TV. And we thought that was funny 4 years ago. It's no longer funny.
Mm-hmm.
And when I've got integrators going back to homes endlessly to get it to work, it's not funny at all. It's time we mature it. So you're going to need to understand the terms. We'll go over some of the terms here because Jason, you spend a lot of time with some other people, and I've got some really talented people on this committee. I got stuck chairing it because I volunteered, but I lean on subject matter experts who know more about HDMI than I do.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Dave Myers, who's now a CEDIA employee. He cut his teeth with quantum data. One of the wizards of HDMI who follows the forum and everything else. And Matt Murray, who works with you, helped design all the radio gear.
Mm-hmm.
So quantum data people, radio people, these guys know the ins and outs of HDMI. They were all subject matter experts. Jason's been writing some of these things, and Rob Saban, who's written for magazines for years, that many of you know, he's actually doing the grammar. All the Uber geeks wrote all the terms, put it all together, but it's got to be able to be readable. So Rob Saban is a fabulous editor. He's edited some of my work. It's one of those guys who can take something you've written and make it shorter and better and read better. So he's a talented editor. He's one of the volunteers, and there's another dozen or so people I couldn't all name, but we've got a brilliant group. It's been a pleasure working with them. So this document is going to take us at least to the point where you could teach classes at CEDIA about how to make it work. And CEDIA has taken the bull by the horns. They've done a good job on this, and they're going to be promoting us. Can we take a look at just the glossary for a moment? Could you just thumb through it?
So this is the CEB 28 document right here. And the glossary starts in chapter 5. And it's
The content is extensive. It's going to take you through step by step for multiple tests for most things you're going to need in a residential environment. So this is the language of HDMI. So the definitions and the glossary. When you get this and take a glance through it, some of these things you should know what these are, because these are the troubleshooting terms you're going to know to make things work, so you don't have to go back to a house 4 times.
Mm-hmm. This document is also pretty cool too, because it walks you through. It gives you kind of a foundation on test equipment and what to look for, and how to do certain tests. Like if I need to test for HDCP compliance throughout a system, this document's going to tell you step 1, step 2, step 3 on how to do specific tests in a system.
So if I had to pick a dream team to debug HDMI, that's this committee.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I sit in on those calls. We have them a couple a month, and I just feel it's kind of an honor just to be in the same group as some of these guys. And
I feel the same way. It's one of these things, you sit in the same room with these people, you leave smarter.
Yeah, definitely.
And you learn, and we all learn from each other, because we have different disciplines and different skill sets.
Sure.
So this is great. Now, this was a prereq to the original home theater document, a home theater design called CEB 23. 5 standards before this. These will be ANSI approved standards. That's where this is going to go next. After we get the proofreading done, it goes off to ANSI. So this will be entertaining. The next document that this is a prep for is rewriting home theater video design.
Right.
Let me just minimize something on my screen here. Excellent, good. We couldn't get home theater design rebuilt until we actually got to turn HDR on. So it's cost us quite a bit of time. And now at least we know more about the upcoming HDMI standards. And Jason's taking me through some of the bandwidth requirements we're going to have in the future.
Right.
Which leads me to another topic that is near and dear to my heart. And that is one of the original bylaws of CEB 23, the home theater design document. One of the things we wrote was very simple. Plan on being able to upgrade the wiring of the system without disrupting the lifestyle of the owner. So I was sitting with an integrator, a builder, a couple just a little while ago, and we're sitting there, and I'm failing to get them to put a conduit into the system so we could rewire. This was not fun. And I'm sitting here and I'm saying, okay, I just have to make one comment. I know I'm going to have to rip this house apart. And they said, but you're supposed to know. I said, I guarantee you out to 2022. After that, I guarantee you I don't know.
Right.
Okay? And if someone tells you they know, they're wrong. Because if the people I know don't know, we don't know yet. But I'm going to have to come in here and do one of two things. Pull a wire in 20 minutes or make a mess and destroy the ceiling and have to spackle and paint and clean up this house again. And nice woman who's sitting there very quietly said, I don't know who this guy is, but you listen to him.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with a mess now. No more tearing up the walls. So we need to be able to put upgradable signal path containers, conduits, spaces in the ceiling wherever we are, because I'm going to keep these customers happy. I don't want to disrupt the house.
Right.
That's a simple scenario. The other scenario is we've talked about high contrast and HDR. In a pitch black room, I know what I'm doing. In a studio environment, I know what I'm doing. But we have more media rooms and dedicated rooms. So there's another organization I volunteer for. Old name was Infocom, new name Avixia. And they wrote a standard a long time ago, and it was magnificent, called Projected Image System Contrast Ratio. And what's brilliant about their standard is it identifies different categories of application for video. Is it casual viewing of math classes, where you're putting black text on white paper? Or is it architectural drawings, which need more contrast? Or is it the medical school, where we're looking at scans from an MRI? Or is it live video? So they've got different categories of contrast, and it was designed for projectors. The committee that I brought here to Boca Raton, we did a face-to-face, the research project was to see if DV, direct view image system contrast, would have similar contrast standards. Could we ratify and approve the existing standards for different technology? Well, turns out that that was easy because the item that hadn't changed were the intended victims, us, people, because the vision hadn't changed. So the specs were pretty much dead nuts on for projectors and flat panels, except flat panels could do a lot more with bad light than projectors could ever hope to be. And then I started talking about video walls, and I said, okay, wait a second. We don't need 2, 3, 4 standards. We just need an image system contrast ratio. So that's what the new standard is going to be. It was pretty much finished. It also is going out for GRAMA and ANSI approval. So on the Avixia side, they've done a fabulous job with that. I look at the full motion video there for media rooms, and they're very clear. This is not a theatrical or studio event. This is commercial AV. We're putting video in front of a group with light in the room. I call that a media room. Yeah. So I lean on that document. So that's pretty much done. That'll be out shortly. Good. And the third one is CEV23. And Jason, you've been volunteered again.
Yes, that's
okay. Same team, everyone's been volunteered. We have a couple of newcomers, some of the studio people are jumping into. So these are 3 interesting documents that give us guidance globally as to what to do. And all I want to do is take what I've seen in the movie theaters and what I've seen in the labs, and I want to bring it to my house, all my customers' houses. Right. I want more light, more color. And on the projection side, one of the things I'm passionate about now, and Jason, you've been here, I need a lot of light for a front projection system. We used to try and emulate, 11-foot Lamberts, 14-foot Lamberts, 48 nits, which is still the DCI specification. If you're putting 48 nits on a guy's home theater, where you spend a fortune on the room, and he's got a 2,000 nit TV in the bedroom, he hates the projector.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
It's lame, it's debilitating, it's boring. So I'm running 333 nits, or a little over 100 foot Lamberts on my projection screen. Yep. Now, it still doesn't have a black and all that, but it's the brightest projector I've ever had. And Jason, have you ever seen a brighter one?
That's probably nothing I've come across.
It's a big projector on a small screen, but that's high performance.
That's what I was about to say. The screen's an appropriate size. The screen might actually be, you probably could even get away with going a little bigger, but the room's good. It's a good room.
There's a big one in the garage. I'll be experimenting as soon as I have some time after the CD. I already got the bigger one here. I'll change it out and see what it looks like. But if you go into my garage, you're going to find a very small car with a very big engine.
Yes,
It's fun. You go into my theater, you're going to find a very small screen with a very big light engine because it's fun.
Yeah,
and the rest of the rooms in my house, you'll find big flat panels with good light control. Yeah, it's fun.
There's something funny about when people design a projection system for a theater room, and as soon as the word projector comes up, that it seems like people have this idea in their head that, oh, I'm doing a projector, so I can do a 180-inch screen. It's like, oh, you need to.
Well, you can. That's the wonderful part. Now, as much as people may pick on 4K, I don't need 4K. I was fine with 1080p. The beauty of 4K at the ITU recommended optimum or maximum viewing height, you can be 1.5 screen heights away from the screen, which means you can put a huge screen in a regular room.
Right.
You can put a 98-inch in the bedroom, and pixels aren't an issue.
Sure.
Budget might be an issue, but pixels are not an issue. So you can do it, but you better bring some light.
Right. Yep. Yep. There's one thing I wanted to touch on with you. We were talking about at the beginning of the webinar, just some like rumors and stuff that have been flying around for some years. And one of the ones I wanted to kind of pick your brain on and see your thoughts. You know, we've heard on forums before and YouTube comments and stuff, and people will say things like, don't bother with HDR, don't bother calibrating it. There's no standard, so just, you know, just don't even worry about it. And I'm thinking, you know, we still have to make sure the EOTF tracking right. We still have to make sure that white's D65. We still have to make sure that, you know, I don't know where that comes from. It's very strange.
Well, let me take you back to the source, and I'll show you exactly where it comes from, because it's not really a simple scenario at this point in time, but we're in a very small window, the launch window of HDR. The story begins with a book published in Amsterdam in 1999 by Peter Barton called The Contrast Sensitivity of the Human Eye. Highly recommended. It's the book that changed everything in electronic imaging in this millennium.
Is that one on Amazon? If people want to look it up.
Amazon for $90, unfortunately. It's a textbook. But sometimes you'll see it called the Barton curve or the Barton threshold, but it's all about Peter Barton's research on the contrast sensitivity of the human eye. And if you look at the people who are working with that book and the bibliography, this is a science textbook. It got really looked at critically for 6 years at the University of British Columbia, our Canadian neighbors to the north, the Applied Physics Lab there. Got a small firm to be a venture capital firm, jump in and identify what it took to build it, and they actually built a monitor and they called it HDR.
HDR, yeah.
And they weren't quite sure what to do with this beast. Could it be geophysics? Could it be manufacturing, CAD/CAM? Volkswagen and others bought it for headlamp and tail lamp design. Before you went to clay, you could do 4 or 5 graphics and then go to clay. See what it looks like. Because going to clay is expensive, so you could do virtual at 4,000 nits and see what headlights actually look like. Around 2007, a couple of acquisitions later, our friends at Dolby Lab take over the whole project. Bring it to San Francisco, including Dr. Wan, who is one of the people behind it, and his team. They do a lot more study, and they come up with something they call the PQ curve, perceptual quantizer, which is basically the Barton curve.
Right.
When I saw that back then, it's again one of those things you don't want to see when you can't have it home. It just ruins you. Looking at 4,000 nits worth of light with real blacks and white colors, and you're realizing that what you're watching at home is an antique.
Yes.
Instant antique.
Yeah.
And SMPTE took a look at that. A lot of engineers and brilliant people looked at it, had the same impression I did, and said like, uh-oh. This is something we have to deal with. From there comes SMPTE 2084, a SMPTE standard, and now your world changes.
Yeah.
Because it was just Dolby, it's one thing. So HDR10 is based upon the Barton/PQ curve, HDR10 Plus by there. You'll look at the Philips SL1, 2, and 3, also based upon that. So that was a major event, and it's based upon a theoretical 10,000 nit display.
Right.
And I've all had people say, oh, you can't watch 10,000 nits. You can't even live with 10,000 nits. My comment is just walk outside.
Yeah.
10,000 nits is not that.
A reflection off of a lake or something is no problem, you know?
Yeah, I mean, so this is a reasonable goal, except it's not reasonable for the technology we have. But if we have a 4,000 nit pulsar being used for the final edit, and I've got an 800 nit monitor, I can't display it.
Right.
4,000 nits. So something is going to give, and that's where the term "there's no standards" comes from. There are indeed not standards existent for what you may want to call color volume mapping or tone mapping or contouring, but we're going to make some intelligent decisions based upon what we think is the best compromise. You'll either lose details in the whites, or you lower the threshold of the midtones to include more details in the whites at the expense of light. Pick your poison. There's no perfect way. You're putting a very large mastering system into a smaller home display.
Sure.
And that's going to get better for 2 reasons. One, our displays are going to get closer. And we've now got AI in consumer TVs that does an amazing job of interpolating real pictures in real time And for the large chipsets in there, forget the old $24,000 devices we had. For the memory, processing, and interpolation power we have, 24 pictures per second gives them a lot of time.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons the two technologies we looked at the shootout were very different. One was driven by software metadata, one was creating its own. They both look great.
That's
so
cool.
We're doing a good job. And as our displays get brighter, we'll do less tone mapping.
Yeah.
So
yep. Eventually you won't need it.
We fought for 709 for 15 years. We tried to get the color of 709 in TV sets for 15 years before we finally got there. And now we've gone so far beyond 709. When I look at a 709 red, it's orange. I go,
like,
I don't want to watch that. And we meandered on over to the 2011 digital cinema initial standards for DCI, sometimes called P3 color. And we're not getting DCI in the home. Let's just get that straight. We're getting DCI color. DCI is a closed circuit TV system for commercial movie theaters.
Right.
But you can take the color points for DCI and you can manipulate them down to a 709 TV, or you can build a TV that can do DCI/P3 primaries and secondary colors, tune them with our white point at D65 instead of the DCI white point, which to your eyes would be green. So yes, we can use the color points from there and create a good home standard as we've done for streaming and disc. And it's a spectacular jump over 1990 709.
Sure.
And it's another intermediate step, because as happy as I am with P3, the original 10,000 nit 2012 system was built on something called 2020 color. And you've seen the charts, we haven't seen the pictures.
Right, we haven't seen, there's nothing yet,
There's 4 minutes of one Disney movie done that way, just for an experiment, and it was pretty awesome. But we will get there, and it's engineering for laser and quantum dots, as opposed to some of the chaos we had in the original old NTSC world, which precipitated the joke, never twice the same color.
Right.
It wasn't a joke, it was a committee run by the government. Engineering couldn't do what they designed, so it turned out to be an embarrassment. Our color scientists didn't forget that.
Sure.
New system in 2020, people are criticizing it, saying, why didn't we do the whole chart? Go way up, get a lot more green. Well, there's no machines that'll do the green.
You can't reproduce it.
People. Well, we can do 2020 in laser and quantum dot. Not affordably this week, but we can do it. We have the technology. So we're going to get a huge step forward in movies, which we've got right now. The high frame rates will give us a huge step forward in sports. Couple that with just something brilliant that should be discussed, the behind the scenes work. People have probably heard the term HLG, hybrid law gamma. What they may not see is the behind the scenes work was a system designed by two entities who have some of the best engineering the planet's ever seen. One, the BBC, and one, the Japanese equivalent of the public broadcasting system, the NHK. And you've met one of the people who went across from Japan to the BBC to put together a global system. So you've got the sheer brilliance of both those organizations, and it's free. So it's kind of tough to beat. So that will bring you HDR in sports.
It's going to be exciting.
Wide gamut, couple that with 120 pictures per second on our side, or even the measly 100 pictures on the PAL countries. So we'll revolutionize sports. And we've already done movies. And then we'll take it brighter and more colorful than we've ever had before. So there's your layout for the next 5 to 7 years. So I tell you, get ready to run into the wire. Get ready to dig into your pockets again. Get ready to get rid of the old gear quick, because the new one's going to be better, and it's fun. So we sat at the 1080p plateau with 709 color for too long.
It lasted for forever.
And when I'm sitting there going to a show and I'm looking around, and I came into this business as a hobbyist, I'm still a hobbyist. One of the most entertaining things that hit me hard in the pocketbook was going into Dolby and seeing Mr. Craig Eggers, who may be on this call, giving me a demo of Atmos, and I was angry with him for two reasons. He said, what are you angry for? I said, well, you've been selling me surround sound for years, it's junk. This is surround sound. 5.1 was not. And number two, I got to drill a lot of holes and cut a lot of wires and make this all work. It's going to cost a fortune. He goes, is it fun? I went, So the audio side now is exciting. The video side's exciting. So when I go to a trade show and I'm not angling to get the new gear, figure out how to afford it. If I'm not doing that, it's a boring show. I love the show because to me, CES and CDA are the world's biggest toy stores.
Sure. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Kid and candy store. Those places.
Yeah, but if there's nothing to buy, it's a terrible trade show.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now I've got a couple of problems. Number one, now I have more wishes than I have money to buy. And the other thing is the new problem. We talked about this. I've never had a situation where there's more content that I want to watch.
Right.
That I have time to watch. I used to actually rewatch movies again.
Yeah.
Multiple times because there was nothing new and exciting. Now between streaming and it's kind of hard to sit here and publicly admit that I'm watching streaming.
I've got 3 copies of The Matrix up here somewhere, and the latest one, the Dolby Vision cut, is, oh my gosh, it's phenomenal. It's great.
I've been sharing with a couple of kids, so I didn't think we'd get it. They got it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
We've got one more left for the little kids to watch, and I just showed them the newspaper story with Keanu Reeves coming back for the other one. So
he's coming back.
This is exciting times, and there's more things that credible people have told me to watch than I have time to watch.
I know.
After CD, I'll catch up.
It's crazy, and every day or so, I feel like somebody's like, "Dude, you got to watch this. It's so good." I'm like, "Oh, I have too many things to watch."
But we never had that problem before.
Never.
Things to watch. So these are good days for quality and quantity of content, and it's involving.
Sure.
It's awesome.
I've got just a couple minutes left, and I know you wanted to run through a couple of slides and talk about some of the HBO stuff. So let me pull those up.
The debacle that was not a debacle?
Yeah, exactly. Let me pull those up really quick, and hopefully everybody can see.
This is social media at its worst.
Give me just one
Blind
moment.
leading the blind, creating problems where they were none. So this slide actually came to me from a friend at Dolby who made something that made me laugh.
Oh yeah.
And this I've shown to a bunch of people. It's made us all laugh. And I didn't get the joke to begin with because of course I watched it and I liked it and I was impressed and it was impactful. So what actually happened here when I woke up in the morning and started looking at all my news feeds and wires and mainstream press telling us this was unwatchable, there was nothing on the screen, it was a terrible thing and HBO blew it and HBO shouldn't do this and HBO was fine. So let's go through a couple of slides here because number one, I can tell you firsthand, we've had private sessions, multiple private sessions for calibration at HBO. In their studios, at their facilities. They own a lot of calibration gear and multiple CalMan licenses.
Sure.
They just finished their new Hudson Yards West Side New York City facility, and one of our talented guys, Kevin Miller, who'll be at CD if you guys are there, he's setting up for a couple of manufacturers there, and we've known him. You've known him for a long time. I've known him. He helped me start the company.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They had 51 monitors that had to be done immediately. They didn't have their own staff. They called him in. So that's a lot of nights and weekends and not much sleep to get it done, but I will tell you that their monitors are on the money and they check them regularly. And the post house people are looking at a script and it says it's a dark, scary nighttime scene where most of the action's in the shadows and it comes out of nowhere and it erupts and it can kill you. And it does kill some people. So let's click another part of this slide. Let's take it apart. So shadows, dark scenes, where's that live? Well, in the digital world, let's talk simply. 17 is dark gray, digitally 16 is black. So somewhere between 17 and 26 in the 8-bit world, where this came from, that's shadows. Let's go look at one more slide and let's actually go look at its simple test pattern from 1982, so 37 years ago, 193 countries agreed that black in digital would be someplace and white in digital would be someplace else. And that's how you set up the monitors to make the movie. So it's like turntable speed. You cut the vinyl at a certain speed, you're kind of obligated to play it back at the same speed.
Yeah.
Don't get inventive.
You don't want chipmunks.
Beethoven's ninth at 39 RPM. Yeah, it's a chipmunk's ninth.
Yeah.
So this was a simple exercise and they got it right. Now here's the tool for this. If you look at the top stripes here, it starts at 17 digital, goes up to 26. That's where dark, scary things in the shadows happen. And I will tell you, you put together an LCD, even a good one, put it over the fireplace and look at it from underneath, off axis, you don't see the top bars.
Not so good, yeah.
Go build a media room. That's some of our integrators do. You've got some light in the room, so you're going to use a gray ambient light rejecting screen. And if you don't change the gamma and the black level, this whole top part is gone. Or put it into a stream where the noise is added to the point where it blocks out the shadows. And that's where the controversy happened. It did not happen on HBO. HBO did a great job.
Sure.
I know you're buying the discs, as I am.
Yeah, there's going to be, there's going to be some 8-season box set 4K, probably a year or two from now. I'm thinking it'll probably be $300 or something. But I mean, that series brought me so much joy, anger, and happiness that I'll spend the money. I mean, it
was an event, and it made careers,
yes,
changed lives, and created entertainment that was global. It was fun, and they didn't blow it.
Right, right.
So all the controversy was in the TV setup, the room environment, and the stream.
Right.
So we've got some work to do as an industry to get the creative work of the artists out there. And one of the new things that just hit this week was from Mike Fiddler's group at the UHD Alliance.
The filmmaker mode. Yeah.
And we've got ISF modes. Our friends at THX put THX mode together. We've had, Technicolor mode at the TVs. These are all good ideas to try and get things close to calibrated. Now, for the end user, it really is a boon if they can find it. So I've got to give credit where credit's due. Between Sony and Netflix, the first time I saw metadata triggered mode change of a TV, where the content told the TV, I'm picking up the remote from you and changing the button. You don't have to bother.
Yeah.
So yes, they were first. The idea is there. I'm hoping that we repeat this many times with Movie Maker mode. And if it gets me halfway calibrated, it's completely legit to pay a lot for a TV and expect one of those modes to be mostly calibrated.
Sure.
You've worked with me on some of these sets where they come out of the box pretty close. I'm guaranteed success as an accurate, compliant to standards calibration if halfway is done at the press of one button.
Right.
Some of the controversy over the motion interpolation modes, whether they should be used a little or a lot, that's a decision that has to be made on a homeowner by homeowner basis.
Exactly.
And it's also
same thing I said.
These are not evil empire decisions. There's some content at 24 that really needs it.
Yeah.
So there are times that should be used. There are times it should not be used.
Sure.
So this is not a simple decision, but it could be made for a client. And you've done demos for clients and showed them what scenes work with and what scenes don't.
Yep. Totally.
Once I've got metadata-driven mode selections, that's newsworthy.
Yes.
So I started a few months back with one. Now it runs across the industry. It's been a personal disappointment of mine to spend decades working with really talented engineers at manufacturing levels, putting together modes that are just awesome compared to the default modes, and people don't find them. They don't read and they don't follow the websites. They have lives. They've got wives, they've got kids, they got jobs. They can't spend 6 hours learning how to use a TV set.
Right, exactly.
So that's why they hire us to begin with. We take care of that.
That's cool.
We're electronic butlers.
It'll be fun.
We make everything in the house work well, but getting an assist from the content side.
Yep.
Good news. And it'll make your job and my job easier when I get to someone's house.
Right.
So I've had it with a number of manufacturers. We've had tremendous manufacturing support. And if you ask me, did the company go beyond your expectations? That was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's just gone places I never dreamed of.
That's so cool.
Taking me 2.5 million miles on just one airline this year. Yes, it's been an exciting year, but there are parts of my body that are saying you should not be in the air this week.
Yeah,
It's been a fun ride. This year has been amazing. Here, next year, and the year after will continue. So if we can convey some of the excitement, one calibration at a time, we walk into people's homes and turn the features on and make it work. Enough light on the screen to be dynamic, secure the color, make the HDMI, turn on the HDR. We do the work and they have fun.
Yeah. Awesome, Joel.
That's the equation. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this and making my life exciting. Yeah,
thank you. Thank you for the time and everything you've done for me personally in the industry. And I know we work very closely with you at AVPro and Murideo. And thanks for everything, man.
They make tools that I need and they gave me solutions.
Yeah.
And when I can walk in, instead of bench machines, when I can walk in with a couple of handheld tools and do an HDMI diagnostic, and I leave and the HDMI system turns on the Dolby Vision flag.
Yep.
TV set. It's a good day.
Very cool. Very cool.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Excellent. Take care.
Bye bye. Okay, guys. Well, that'll conclude the webinar for today. Give me just a second, and I'll grab another slide just so you can get a little more maybe info on how to reach us and whatnot. So let's click over here, and there's a bit of information for you. If you have any questions about the webinar today, I know we ran a little bit late, so thank you for hanging out and staying on. If there was any questions that I wasn't able to get to throughout the presentation, I'll go through those tonight, and I'll post those up on the Murideo forums and send out you guys maybe some individual emails if the questions are real specific. But thanks again. Feel free to visit our website. You'll see the 7G generator along with our other products at murideo.com. If you have any questions about anything, feel free to give us a call. Numbers are up there on the screen. There's also an email address, info@avproglobal.com. You can always email me directly if you have specific questions, jason@avproglobal.com. If you want to hit the imaging science website, it's imagingscience.com. Anything that you need to know about CalMan or portrait displays will be portrait.com. And if you want to check out Vincent's website, it's hdtvtest.com. I'm sorry, .co.uk. And if you do a simple search on YouTube for HDTV test, you'll find tons and tons of great videos by Vincent. This video will be up on YouTube in the next day or so. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks a lot.